Okay, guys, I hope you're sitting down because you're not going to believe this one. You remember that thing that happened a few years ago, that Brexit thing? We left the EU. Well, whether you loved it or hated it, and I'll be honest, I wasn't waving the leave flag myself. But the point that was supposed to be crystal clear was, taking back control, right? Of our borders, of our laws, of our roads even. No more Brussels telling us what to do, right? Well, fast forward to 2025, and guess what? The UK is now actively considering adopting 19 brand new EU driving laws. That's right, 19. All of them relating to so-called safety technologies in your car. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, believe me, this is what's being considered, and I'll explain everything right after this.
A brown car guy.
Right, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but we Brexited to get away from European rules being imposed on us, right? I mean, honestly, as I mentioned, personally, I was against Brexit, and frankly, I think it's been a disaster for our economy. That's just my view. But as a petrol head, I was still going to take the silver lining, which meant that Europe's draconian driving rules would not be applied to us here now. However, that lining is slowly being peeled off and discarded, I'm afraid. So, speaking in the House of Lords, Lord Hendy of Richmond Hill, CBE, who is Minister of State at the Department for Transport, said the government is reviewing which of the 19 new vehicle safety technologies mandated by the EU would be appropriate for implementation here in the UK. During a parliamentary session, he told peers, this is under really active consideration at the moment. He explained this creates a market incentive for manufacturers to develop increasingly safer vehicles. So to be clear, this would only apply to new cars. Nonetheless, I have to say, as someone who's been reviewing new cars for 35 years, cars are now safer and better at keeping you out of trouble than ever before. Better braking, better handling, better steering systems, advanced traction control systems, and proactive anticipatory driver's aids, plus amazing crash safety cell structures. All of these things, etc., are designed to keep you so much safer than they've ever done before. It's also worth mentioning at this point that the UK has actually got one of the best safety records in the world, with only a few countries having fewer fatalities per person. Yes, I know what it feels like out on the road. I know it feels crazy and it's terrible driving, but actually it's still much safer here than the majority of the world. Even in Europe, we have the third lowest road death rate per million of the population across 32 European countries at 25 deaths per million. In 2023, there were 1,624 fatalities on roads in Britain. That was actually a 5% decrease compared to 2022. Now, admittedly, even a single death is a death too much. And things have actually slowed down when it comes to these impressive stats in the UK. So in the last decade, road fatalities reduced by only 9% compared to a drop of 47% in the previous decade. But then a lot of the safety tech that we now take for granted on cars, things such as ABS, which I think is one of the best things that ever happened on a car, anti-lock brakes, these were all widely implemented. I mean, that's been around for a while, but it was widely implemented a couple of decades ago. So I reckon that probably could account for the sudden drop off in road fatalities in 2 decades ago, if you like. So coming back to these 19 so-called new rules from Europe, what are they? Now, they haven't officially published which ones the UK will adopt or is thinking of adopting, but we do know what the EU has mandated. These are part of the EU General Safety Regulation that kicked off, I think, in July 2022 and became compulsory for Europe in 2024 for all new cars. Now, frankly, a lot of these are actually fine. And in fact, we pretty much already have most of them, or rather most new cars already have this stuff on them. And rest assured, mostly it's all good. But here I'll give you a rundown of what the 19 are likely to be. So number 1, autonomous emergency braking, AEB. This is great when it works. It's terrifying when it decides to brake because it thinks that a plastic bag on the road is actually a toddler. These systems have given me heart attacks in the past on more than one occasion, I'll tell you, to be honest. But to be fair, they have been around for several years now, and they are getting better. Number 2, driver drowsiness detection. These are systems that tell you, oi, you have blinked too slowly, take a break. Really? I've had coffees that are less judgmental than that. But having said it, it's no bad thing, I suppose. Number 3, lane departure warnings. Now these are separate from assistance. This is the one that they just keep nagging you with bings and bongs. It's just all very annoying. Number 4, and lane keeping assist, aka the tug of war with your steering wheel. It feels like a constant fight for dominance every time you change lanes. Some cars do this better than others, but personally, I usually turn them off if I can figure out how to, because sometimes they're burying these systems in the menus, right? Number 5. Emergency stop signal. This basically flashes the hazard lights if you brake really hard. To be honest, that one's actually quite useful. Number 6, reversing detection systems. I mean, this is a case of more beeps and bongs than the 90s rave, right? I mean, it's useful, I suppose, for people who think that mirrors are optional. Look around you, right? Or turn your head. Number 7, blind spot information system. These alert you to vehicles that you should be checking for by, well, turning your head and looking over your shoulder. But to be fair, most cars have had, Volvo I think were one of the pioneers of this, and most cars have had these systems now for quite a while. Number 8, crash optimized front ends to reduce injury to pedestrians and cyclists. This is basically why we can't have things like pop-up headlights anymore, and it can compromise the design and the look and the styling of a car. But overall, it's not a bad thing if it saves the lives of pedestrians and cyclists. Number 9, improved crash test performance. Well, this is a must really, isn't it? Because no manufacturer wants anything less than a full 5-star rating on the Euro NCAP crash safety test rating, right? Number 10, improved seatbelt reminders, because apparently we still haven't figured that one out yet. And for the record, the UK seatbelt wearing in the UK, seatbelt wearing became mandatory on the 31st of January 1983. This was for front seat passengers. Number 11, and rear seatbelt reminders, because back seat passengers are clearly incapable of remembering how to adult by themselves. And again, for the record, rear seatbelt use was made compulsory for children in 1989 and for adults as well in 1991. Number 12, enhanced TPMS, which is tire pressure monitoring system. Again, to be honest, this is no bad things, and many of the latest cars have these systems anyway. Number 13, advanced emergency braking for lorries and buses, which makes sense because it takes a while to stop those behemoths. Number 14, direct vision for HGVs, removing blind spots. Well, that's just logical design really, isn't it? Although I have to say, when it comes to mirrors on these things, have you noticed that they've been disappearing on the latest lorries and buses? And instead they're replaced by cameras and monitors. Personally, this worries me, and it's only because I've always struggled a bit with the camera monitor systems that replace mirrors. Let me know what you think. Or if you're a truck driver and you have this, I'd love to know what that experience is like. Number 15, side collision warnings. Now, these are helpful if for some reason you're not able to use your eyes to look around you as you're driving. Again, one of the things about advanced driving or defensive driving techniques is to be able to build up a constant picture of what's going on around you. Just keep that in your head. And that's just from observation and awareness and alertness of what other traffic and other road users are doing. Apparently, most people don't have the ability to do that, it seems, so we have now side collision warnings. Number 16, pedestrian and cyclist detection. Useful for when they creep up on you in your blind spot, which is something the car was supposed to be telling you about anyway, right? Number 17, alcohol interlock compatibility. Now here's where things start to get insidious. Now this is basically a system that locks you out of being able to start your car until you've been breathalyzed. I don't know how exactly the mechanics of how this works, but that's what it's about. I mean, this is not mandatory yet, but I believe that they're putting in a requirement that cars, this is not mandatory in Europe, I should have said, but they're putting in a requirement that cars must be equipped with this breathalyzer start system in anticipation of this being made into law. I don't know how you feel about this, but as a non-drinker, honestly, I take umbrage at it, and I find it a little bit insulting, quite frankly. Plus, the implications of breathing at your car every time you have to start it, or other people that get in, valet drivers or mechanics or whoever, other people that get in your car and have to move it or drive it, also breathing into it. it doesn't really appeal, frankly, and especially in light of, COVID and what have you. Number 18, Intelligent Speed Assistant, ISA. Now, actually, all new cars now have this. Even the cars that are sold this, they're already fitted. But in the UK, you can turn the alerts off. In Europe, I think you can't turn the alerts off. But admittedly, to be honest, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. I worked in the UAE. And cars in that part of the world have actually had this system for decades. And when you hit 120 kilometers per hour, whatever, certain speeds, they start binging and bonging, or there's some kind of an alert. So, you mostly get used to it. Where this gets problematic, and which is what this is now getting to be about, is moving it from just an alert to actual interference. So your car not only tells you that you're speeding, but it actually takes over and slows you down. That's right, the car polices your speed. Now you may think that's okay, just don't speed. But there are times, for example, say you pull out to overtake a line of cars. Now you've committed yourself, but there's a truck coming the other way, and suddenly the speed limiter applies the brakes. 19. Wow. Event Data Recorder, EDR. Yes, this is basically a black box in your car, like in a plane. So it's there to record what you're doing before and during a crash, presumably after as well, if it's still working, I guess. This is great for insurance companies, but it's all a bit George Orwell 1984 though, right? And it's very intrusive. Honestly, I'm a little bit uncomfortable about a system like that. Hey, before I carry on, make sure that you have hit like, and don't forget to share and subscribe. By the way, help out my channel by supporting me on Patreon and Ko-fi, or by taking out a subscription right here on YouTube. Or better still, buy my books. I've got 3 of them out now. There's 2 of them. Those are fiction. One is a novel. It's the novel that every petrolhead should read. It's called The Ulysses Files. It's about the war on motorists. And the other one is a collection of my short stories from over 2 decades. Everything from science fiction to cars to the state of humanity. And then this is my latest book. This is basically me putting my 35 years of experience and knowledge doing what I do into a book to help other people get into this game. So if you've ever thought about being a content creator, a journalist, or an influencer to do with cars, you need to get this book. It's out now on Amazon. Right, so coming back to the subject at hand, these are probably, but not definitely, what those 19 systems are likely to be that Lord Hendy was talking about. And now all of these systems that I've gone through, a lot of them, to be honest with you, they sound great on paper, and some of them are actually quite useful. When they're done right, these features can be genuinely life-saving. But here's the problem. And I say this as someone who's driven tons of cars, tons of different cars over the years, and tried many of these new systems on these cars. A lot of them tend to be quite intrusive. Some cars have got it right. It's where these systems are subtle, they're refined, they're helpful in the background. You don't even realize that they're there until you actually need them. They're like a good butler. Discreet, classy, doesn't spill the tea. But some are like having a built-in backseat driver. So they're constantly beeping, they're chiming, they're buzzing, brakes that grab the car from you, or steering wheels that are constantly fighting you, and occasionally just decide to do their own thing, rendering you redundant and rather traumatized. Sometimes it feels like you're battling the car just to assert authority and dominance over it. And what does this all do to you? I think it can actually make driving more stressful, and in some cases, actually more dangerous. I have had moments in cars when the car slammed on the brakes thinking that I'm about to hit something that isn't actually there. Nothing gets the heart racing faster than thinking you've just crashed into an invisible wall. Other times the car has literally decided to change lanes of its own accord. Scared the shit out of me, honestly. Sometimes it's genuinely safer to just turn the systems off. However, on the other hand, in a separate, unrelated report, IAM Road Smart folks, they did a survey of about 2,000 people, and they're saying that not enough of us are using this tech. And their suggestion, they actually want to make changes to the highway code to make it compulsory for us to use them. I'm sorry, what? So not only are we being, or we could be force-fed, I should say, EU regulations, but now people are talking about legislating how we must use our own car. It's like being told that you must drive the car with the heating on full and the sunroof closed, even on a hot sunny day. I mean, this is getting a bit ridiculous. But anyway, according to the IAM report, Only about 25% of drivers regularly use collision warning and cruise control. Younger drivers and people who drive more than 10,000 miles a year are more likely to use the tech, but the average motorist, especially older ones or those driving casually, don't. Could it be that maybe that's because they know how to drive? Anyway, the funny thing is, IAM's own conclusion is that drivers are switching these things off because they're irritating, they don't fully understand them, or they just don't like how they feel. In other words, the user experience is poor. So what's the solution? Well, it seems don't fix the tech, just force people to use the systems anyway. I don't get it. Let's talk common sense and logic here. If the car is constantly correcting you, bleeping at you, slamming the brakes or turning the wheel of its own accord, then you're no longer driving the car. The car is driving you. And that is when safety goes out the window, in my opinion, because you're not focusing on safety anymore. You're focusing on fighting the car. The more that we rely on driver assist systems, the more complacent we start to become. We end up paying less attention. We trust the tech to be our lookouts and to be our safety nets. And that, I think, is when the real danger on the road starts to happen. Now, I've always said this, and yes, I know it might be a bit of a shocker, but forget the airbag in the middle of your steering wheel. If you really want people to drive safely, what you should all do, or what manufacturers should do, is put a big, long, sharp spike right in the middle of that steering wheel hub, pointing directly at you from the steering wheel. Scary, right? Okay, look, come on. Don't worry. I don't mean that literally, but it's like a powerful metaphor, right? It's something to think about. It's something that focuses your attention. Nothing will sharpen your senses more than that, right? Because if your life depended on being 100% careful and no sudden movements, no sudden braking, no sudden acceleration, no accidents, if your life depended on it, you would be a far better driver, because that sense of constant awareness would be there. And that is what's missing from driving these days because of all of the distractions. All the distractions, everything from obviously your own mobile phone to the car constantly seeming to second guess your intentions and fighting you at the helm. Now here's the thing. Recent data from the US and global road safety analysts show that despite the years of these tech advances, road deaths aren't dropping globally. In some cases, they're going up. That's right. Cars are cleverer, but the roads are turning deadlier. Why? Because, as I've said, these features might work in lab tests and marketing brochures, but in the real world, they're often misunderstood, ignored, or, as I've said, mentioned, they just lull people into a false sense of security. You just rely on them too much, and you're not actually doing the driving yourself. You're not focusing or paying attention to what's happening on the road around you. Even the experts are beginning to admit driver's aids might be making things worse, not better. And the problem is that people seem to have stopped talking about driver training. I mean, driver training has been, and always will be the answer. I mean, seriously, when was the last time you heard an ad campaign for better driving skills? All the adverts these days are just about kill your speed, not a person. But that's just an oversimplification of the act of driving, right? And whatever happened to pedestrian education, especially in schools? I mean, it was drummed into us as kids. What happened to things like the green cross code, huh? Remember that? Stop, look, listen. These days it's walk out, AirPods in, nose buried in your phone, eyes nowhere on the traffic. And when something goes wrong, where does the blame land? Always, without question, it lands on the motorist. Never mind the fact that someone strolled out into the middle of the road thinking like they're in a musical or something. Now, we've created a system where everyone's relying on machines to keep them safe. Which up to an extent they can do, or they can certainly mitigate the repercussions of an incident. But really, we should be looking at, instead of that, teaching people how to behave responsibly on the roads and around other road users in the first place. So let's not blindly follow EU rules just because they're stamped safe. Let's educate drivers. Let's build better tech that assists rather than overrules. And above all, let's leave some choice with the driver. Because if we keep letting the car take over, we're not driving anymore. We're just passengers on four wheels. Or maybe that's what they're preparing us for. But that, I think, is a subject for a different video at a different time. Anyway, make sure that you hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons on your way out. Make sure you leave a comment on this, because I look forward to hearing what you have to say about this, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Drive safe! Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.